All right, hello chess friends. Welcome back to another video. And in today's video, we are covering one of the greatest uh, players and world champions ever. Um, so, very recently, um, the chess world was um, woken up to very sad news that uh, Boris Spassky, Russia's Boris Spassky, had passed on, and he was the oldest living world chess champion. And I thought, let's pay some homage to the late great world champion and show one of his better games, his best games, actually, his most notable games. And it is against none other than Bobby Fischer. And just a little history before we continue. This game, specific one, is from 1960 in Argentina, um, at the Mar del Plata. Nah? And it's worth noting that yes, Bobby Fischer does have a positive score against Boris Spassky, but it's much closer than we think. The score is 17 to 11 with 32 draws between the two, in classical at least. Yeah. So these two have had many rivalries, many battles, uh, creating one of the greatest rivalries in chess history, as it transcended chess, as we all know, during the wartime between East and West. And these two men were in the forefront of it all, so really, really sad that a chapter in chess history closed just a couple days ago, when Boris Spassky passed on. But if we look at the game then, Boris Spassky started with 1 to e4. 1 to e4 then, and Bobby Fischer responds with e5, the king's pawn game. Immediately, Boris Spassky goes 1, 2 to f4. We are now in a King's Gambit territory. And you'll note that the King's Gambit was actually what he played then against Bronstein, David Bronstein, which was considered one of his immortals. We'll cover that game too very soon. Yeah, 1f, 2f4. After that, we have e takes f, knight to f3, very thematic, and g5. Very common here is D6, something that Fischer actually advocates for. I recently saw David Howell, Grandmaster David Howell, do an analysis on this when he said D6 is a move Fischer advocates for, just getting this bishop out, developing quick, and you're safe. And D6 also helps for thrusts like that. H6 is an option to prepare for G5 and to prevent the knight from jumping, and the immediate G5 as well is in theory. We have H4 immediately attacking the G5. Of course, if we go G takes, this is very nice for white. Even if you go knight takes, very nice for white. So H4, he declines the trade and he goes G4. That's Fischer. After G4, we get the move knight to E5, jumping in the center. Also looking at this pawn on F7, bishop C4 ideas, queen takes on G4 ideas. So very vibrant approach from Spassky, from Spassky. So Fischer goes knight to f6. We have d4 taking over the center, and it's something that Spassky really advocated for. Quick development taking over the center. d6, then Fischer does play it. We have knight to d3. Of course, you cannot take on g4 because knight would take, queen would take, and bishop would take. So you'd end up losing a lot of material. We have knight takes on e4. Fish is now up 2 pawns, 2 clean pawns, and is slightly better. If you look at evaluation, the engine will say, depending on the engine, but like minus 0.8 to 1. So bishop takes on f4. Spassky recaptures the f4 pawn and develops his bishop. We are now in one of the gambits in the King's Indian accepted, which is known as the Kisaritsky gambit. I hope I pronounced correctly, which is then a variant of the Berlin defense. Very interesting how the variations can branch out. Bishop to g7, then Fischer is just developing, trying to castle kingside, and also perhaps eyeing this d4 pawn with a fianchettoed bishop. So, after bishop to g7, we get knight to c3. Spassky also just developing, saying, okay, you can take my bishop, my pawn on d4, but not really advised, because if we turn, let's turn this on quickly. If you go here, suddenly you're just hanging your knight for nothing. So we don't go there. We go knight takes and pawn takes, and of course now the d4 pawn is sufficiently protected. B takes c then, we have c5 striking on the flank there, trying to get rid of the central pawn here. Bishop to e2. Spassky says, okay, I'm going to try and hit this g4 pawn now. Let me try and recollect my pawns. Fischer correctly says c takes d. And Spassky doesn't even consider, think about taking back the pawn. He castles. If we go back here, if Fischer decides to capture, if Spassky decides to capture, well, now Fischer just gets this. Bishop takes on d4. There's no castling prospects, right? And it's suddenly very awkward. Yeah, the knight could jump maybe here to b4 and hit this bishop, but it's easily countered. The bishop can obviously just drop back. Say now the knight goes to f2. You could even take, king takes, queen b6 ideas and castle then. So a lot of prospect for white uh, if Spassky went for this pawn trade in the center with c takes d on move 12. Instead, Spassky castles. And now if we look at the position, yes, Fischer is slightly better still. But optically, if you look at it from a human perspective, you might argue and say, well, you prefer playing white here. Reason being, let's look. F file is half open. You have bishop eyeing here. This pawn, the queen is eyeing here. This bishop is well developed. What does black have going? Most of their pieces are back on the 8th rank. They only have a bishop on g7. Not much happening. Not much dynamic, not much firepower and dynamic play for black at the moment. Yes, it can happen quite quickly, but it's not happening right now. That's the difference. White has play right now, could generate quick play here, right? I take, for example, here, you castle, you could go here, here, bishop takes here, and queen takes. Surely this cannot be that bad for white. Let's turn on evaluation. Yes, white is then slightly better, right? So despite black being up a pawn, but just positionally you are better. These pawns are vulnerable. They are double D pawns. Queen G3 is coming, hitting this pawn. It's better for white in the set, in that sense. So after castles, we turn that off. We have knight to c6. Bishop takes g4 as shown, and castles kingside. So Fischer had developed his knight, so that's the only difference from the line we just discussed now, is now that the knight c6. Spassky goes bishop takes c8, getting rid of the bishop, and also perhaps just to make space for the queen to come to g4 and removing the light square bishop. Of course, he's now giving up his light square bishop, but he'll get the queen to g4, jump in very soon. In fact, immediately. So queen to g4, f5, as the engine 9 also showed just now. And then Spassky just drops back to g3. As you can now see, hitting the d6 pawn as well. That looks very tentative and hanging, right? We have d takes c, which is correct by Fischer. Now Spassky again ignores taking the pawn and instead prioritizes development. So he's playing in a very romantic way, right? Which is correct in the sense because you need to get pieces out. You've given up two pawns. So when pawns are removed and given up, generally it's because you're trying to create what is known as space for your pieces to get out there, right? Rook a to e1. The plan is quite clear: is to double up with rooks, come to the 6th, 7th rank, cause some problems here, and hit here, right? King to h8. Fischer perhaps sensing, okay, we could be in some danger in a couple moves, so let me remove my king from the g file so that my bishop is not pinned to my king. Okay, Spassky says, okay, I'm going to copy you here. King to h1, sort of a prophylactic move, you could argue. King to h1, rook to g8, and bishop takes on d6 finally. So now you think maybe there's discoveries. And there's another reason why Spassky went king to h1. It's because Rook to g8 sets up potential discovery had the king still been on g1. So, rook to g8, we have bishop takes d6. After bishop d6, bishop f8. Now the bishop's hit as well as the queen. Double attack, but not a problem. After bishop to d5, e5 with check. Well, some trades will be forced now. Knight takes, queen takes, and you'd expect bishop to g7, but here it is rook to g7. Let's go back for a moment. Both are fine, of course. First instinct I'd go for is for bishop g7 here, as the engine does suggest. But Fischer being Fischer goes rook to g7, and perhaps he saw something deeper. Now this rook is pinned to the king. Will that prove to be a problem? Let's find out. Rook to g7. We have rook takes on f5. Rook takes on f5. So the rooks are coming alive here. This knight is alive. A lot of prospect. And let's take a step back. The material is equal now. The position is slightly better for black, of course, still, but their pieces are still tied on the 8th rank, and their rook is pinned. So the pieces are kind of frozen and stuck. Let's see what happens next. Rook takes on f5. Queen takes on h4 with check. All right, cool. That piece is freed up. King to g1 cannot take here because the queen will take your queen. On e1, we have queen to g4. After queen to g4, the move rook to f2, just dropping back. Obviously, there's a checkmate threat, defending mate. Bishop to e7. Perhaps now Fish is looking at bishop to h4. Simple, just to fork the rooks there, to pin one rook. Rook to e4, hitting the queen. Now Fischer has to be very careful. Queen to g5, and the position is equal. Queen to d4, and the engine is saying go for this move b5, which is so crazy to find. It's hard to even understand why b5 is that good. But here Fischer goes for rook to f8, and this looks fine because, well, you are saying if, of course, you take, I take. Let's say this happens. Takes. Well, the game just continues, right? It's dead drawn. But there's something that Fischer missed in this position, small detail. So let's see what it was. After rook to f8, then Spassky doesn't go for the drawn line. In fact, now he's going for the kill. He goes for the win. Rook to e5. And suddenly, that queen kind of looks a bit trapped, right? Because after rook to e5, the queen must move now. But Fischer tries to complicate things and says, no, you take my queen, I'll take your queen. And the game just continues. Again, if we go for this line, identical line, the engine will tell you it's a bit better for black even, right? Quite equal, but better for black. But Spassky doesn't have to take here. Instead, what Spassky does is he goes queen to e4. And what queen to e4 does is simultaneously attack this queen on g5 with the rook, but as well, the queen and rook create the sort of starter Alekhine gun. Had this rook been here, of course, it would be a full Alekhine gun. But there's a double attack now. There's an attack on the bishop on e7 as well. And you will notice that this queen cannot defend the bishop anymore on this line, right? And of course not here, like that. It can't defend on this diagonal anymore because if it goes to f6, you lose your queen like that. If it goes to h4, well, you lose your queen like that. Well, no. If it goes to h4, of course, there's rook to rook to f4. Sorry, guys, I overlooked that detail. Rook to f4. And now after rook to f4, let's say queen to h6, you you are preparing to capture on the e7, right? Yeah, as the engine does approve. Of course, if you take here, you take here, but then you are losing, you are bleeding material. Yeah, you can even start like that. Yeah, and then just mate in a few moves. That will be very simple. So, yeah, this was the detail that Fischer missed then after going rook to f8. Spassky finds rook to e5, threatening the queen. Fischer goes rook to d8, the simple queen to e4. Uh, Queen to h4, as shown. Rook to f4, queen to h6. Spassky captures on e7, rook takes e7, queen takes e7. Again, if you capture the exact line plays out that we've shown, queen takes on f4, queen takes on d8 with check, and perhaps Fischer thought he might have some chances to maybe draw because he has a far advanced c3 pawn, but it's impossible here because the checks are just rolling in. King to g7, and he loses his queen. So, in fact, it's not just a loss, it's a brutal loss for Fischer in this game because takes there. I think Fischer also just gave it away here after taking there. Yeah, that's him basically saying I resign because the better moves here would not have been to just give up your queen, right? You try and play on, but obviously it's dire now the situation. Maybe try swing your rook over, do something. But Fischer just gave up the queen. Spassky checked on d8, king to g7, and um, knight takes on f4. It was in this position on 33. Bobby Fischer resigned, guys. So if we look back in history, this was still around the time that Spassky was really, really beating Fischer a lot. Fischer hadn't scored a win against Spassky until the World Championship game in round three. So that would be 12 years after this game was played, and because the World Championship match was in 72. So yeah, these two have a very rich history, and I thought to myself, why not cover one of the great games that Spassky uh, had against none other than his great rival and friend, Robert James Fischer. So, guys, if you enjoyed this video and found it informative and exciting, please do consider hitting the like, comment, and subbing. It does mean a lot for the channel. And if you have any suggestions for like more videos or any other game I should maybe cover, or just any chess related thing you would like me to assist you with, do hit it in the comment section below. I don't mind doing it for you. This is why I do it, just to help you grow as a player on your journey and to have fun as we learn and go. So yeah, guys, have a great day ahead and take care. Goodbye.